Welcome to Career Tools. Today's cast, Press Relations, Part 1 of 2. Well, many of you probably haven't thought about it before, but all of us need some simple guidelines for our relationship with the press, in whatever form that is. And today we have a lot of straightforward ideas to share, some of which will surprise many of you. Here we go. Well, the internet and this explosion of new media has really created another opportunity for folks to shine. Right? Isn't that right? I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities to interact with the press, and when we say the press, I'm talking about all forms of the press, right? Blogs,
right.
Traditional media, podcast, you name it. There's a lot of opportunity for folks to interact with the press.
Yeah. Depends on how you define shine, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Let's say they have an opportunity to interact with the press.
Yes.
Whether they shine or not is another question entirely. And
yeah,
of course, we have some things to say about that.
Yeah, we have some straightforward ideas to share about how to have a good relationship with the press. This is one of those casts, when we were talking about it in advance, Wendy said this is classic career tools because it's something nobody teaches, press relationships, usually unless you're an executive, that there is enormous risk. And unfortunately, lately, because of the explosion of new media, there's even more risk because people mistakenly believe that they can just talk to the media like they're friends. And too many people are going to end up regretting that in the long run. So.
Good. So why don't you give us an outline of what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, we got a lot of points here.
We do.
Yeah, the modern media and the press are different in some ways. We need to talk about that for a little bit because I know when we say press, people think, newspapers and TV, and that's not exactly what we mean. Okay. Number two, your company probably has rules about this, and they probably say don't do it, or they require you to go to training. Number three, no comment is always appropriate and very often the right answer. Number four, stay positive. Number five, simply repeat your point when challenged, believe it or not. This is where a lot of people fail. Number six, big surprise here, but the media are not just reporting. If you think they're just gathering facts, you're mistaken. Number seven, watch diligently for the opposing point of view. This is how people are often made to look silly in the press. Number eight, just because you're right, what you're saying is true, doesn't mean your comments are going to be appreciated. Number nine, this will stun people. You will be misquoted, and it is legal to misquote you, at least in the U.S. Number 10 is what we call the Anna Scott Notting Hill rule. And number 11, we recommend sort of flipping this on its head a little bit, that you maintain your own clipping service for your firm and so on. So a lot of points.
That is a lot. So okay, so let's get right into it. And we talked about a little bit in the beginning here, but modern media today is much more diverse than they used to be, right? I mean, and that's good for the spread of information and communications, but sometimes, just sometimes, not so great for us.
Sometimes, right. Yeah. I think what's happened is new media, the internet and blogs and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, they adopted some of the rules of the old media in terms of talking to people and getting background and so on. And the best.
Yeah, but then they invented some of their own along the way. We don't like that rule, so we're just gonna change it.
Yeah. And to be fair to them, they also thought that rule made no sense for the new media kind of thing. And either because the purpose or value, the purpose of the old rule for the old press was one thing, and that purpose or the value associated with it doesn't exist. So we certainly respect the explosion of new media, and here we are talking on a podcast, which is a form of new media. But you're right in the sense that they have changed the rules enormously, and frankly, the majority of people I know don't know the old rules, let alone the new rules. And I think there is an underlying, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think there's an underlying misunderstanding that the new media, and frankly, therefore, because most people don't, most particularly young people today, don't think about the press, and the press is part of the media, obviously. What ends up happening is people simply see it as an opportunity rather than a risk. And the rules and the guidelines that people give are built around the opportunity rather than around mitigating the risk. So our guidance here is really simple. For each type of new media, and even for different organizations or companies' deliveries of each type of new media, there are individual rules that we recommend for professionals. The rules are different, and while more openness is often encouraged, folks, there are professional risks involved, and these risks, they create situations that are often irreversible for us in our careers. This cast specifically tends to focus more on old media, but it has special significance, we feel, because many of the principles of behavior for new media were built out of old media guidance. And when we say new media, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, Flickr, LinkedIn, chat rooms, blogs, all of it, they are different, obviously, than the press. And in many ways, totally better. And look, we like the value we can get from all the new media, but the problem is that's where the analysis stops, at the value. And I was saying before, all value inherently carries risk. Even ice cream, it has value, but it has risk associated with it. There are no free lunches. And what this means for us is that we all have an obligation to know how to relate to all of the media, press, non-press, new and old, generally. And then each of them, we need to learn how to interact with each of them specifically. If we're going to think about ourselves as professionals and we're going to come in contact with the media and we're going to make representations or an impression that's going to redound to us and to our industry and to our company and perhaps to our families and so on. We've already done one cast on social media, the MySpace cast, and despite what we're sure are many people who disagree with us regarding our approach and assuming that our approach, which is assuming that everything we do on the internet is public, and so professionals and managers must not get too personal or private in social or other media. We have been, I must say that people send us more notes about how right we are. Time and again, we've been proven right about articles and stories and anecdotes forwarded us from all over the world, from many of our members saying, oh, another case where somebody did something stupid or lame on Facebook or MySpace or on their blog or whatever, and they got fired. I remember reading a brief aside in a men's magazine. I want to say it was Men's Health, and at the bottom there's a little thing by Dan Abrams, who's I think he's a lawyer. And somebody wrote in, can I get fired because of what's on my blog? And Dan Abrams said yes. And so often lawyers give equivocal answers, but his answer was yes, period. He said they can fire you for almost anything at any time, in the same way that because of at-will employment, you can quit at almost anything, anytime, for almost any reason. It's not a compact, it's not a contract. And people are stunned. And this is a sort of more modern, it's not a stuffy it's not the Wall Street Journal saying this is how you have to behave if you want to be an old person or mature. This is simply the risk that comes with being in a society where there are all kinds of media. And if you say something, it's going to be overheard. Right. And if it's overheard by the media, a lot of people are going to overhear it.
Yeah, as individuals, we have a lot of power these days to communicate our ideas and thoughts as widely as possible. But unfortunately, with great power, and the power to communicate here, with great power comes great responsibility. Responsibility for others and the impact of your thoughts and ideas. And frankly, the impact of your thoughts and ideas and communications on yourself. And often folks don't think about that.
Yeah, I something else too. I think in general, let me see if I can characterize it this way. Too many people that we talk to generally are of the mindset that there are all kind of media out there, and we can exploit them to some degree. We can use them to our advantage. We can build our career with them. We can become somewhat of a public figure, and in that way enhance our career, put a little steroids in our career path. In other words, let's start with, again, value. We recommend a different approach, which is start with risk. And that's why, in terms of this cast, we're starting talking about the press. It's old media. And yet, if you start with the idea that there is risk and that your first responsibility is to mitigate risk by understanding the rules of the various media, and believe me, some of the new media use old media rules. If you start by understanding the risks and build a set of behaviors for working with the press that are built on risk, then when you try to get value out of it, you won't make mistakes and have things blow up in your face the way so many people do. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but young people more than not, than more experienced people. So if you're under the age of 30 and you're wondering, is this a fuddy-duddy cast? It's not. This is how to start your relationships with the media. And maybe if you have a blog, then you're way ahead of us. But we would recommend that you understand the risk first, mitigate that risk, develop strong behaviors around this stuff, and then learn at certain opportunities when to create value out of your relationship with the press and new media.
Good. Okay. So, given all this risk, isn't it safe to assume that particularly if you're part of a large company, that your company probably has rules around all this?
You think? Yeah. And look, if you're at a large organization, just because you don't know what the rules are doesn't mean there aren't rules, right? And this is one of those things. Again, it's like management. It's a much smaller problem than management, but nobody's teaching it. There are rules, but nobody's teaching it. Everybody just assumes you'll get it. And they assume that you won't make a big enough mistake that you'll get us and you in a lot of trouble.
I think part of that, though, is it's companies, frankly, haven't quite figured it out yet, or certainly haven't implemented the changes required, because it used to be that opportunities for speaking to the press were much more tightly controlled and manageable. And today, with this proliferation of different media channels, the opportunity for interaction with, quote unquote, the press are greatly enhanced, and companies haven't quite figured out how to, I don't say rein that in, but communicate their policies such that they don't get themselves into hot water.
Yeah, and I think what's happened is the companies have done a poor job of communicating it, and no sense in ignoring that. And what's happening is the education of professionals of the workforce is happening through dramatic events. People are getting fired for saying or doing stupid things in what amounts to public because it's being picked up by old or new media. And so rather than there being a coherent training effort, there are examples. And anytime training is done by examples, you want something different, right? We don't want examples of, don't do that. Look at what happened to him. We want to have a coherent policy and a coherent way of addressing this stuff. But I think you're totally right. And look, they've been burned too many times, companies have, to not have healthy respect for the press and other media. And at the same time, we've all read about companies using new media or trying to use new media for their own advantage. And that's great. And it proves that they're thinking about the value. And therefore, surely, right, they've thought about the risk. But look, the way most large firms deal with the risk is to limit it, as you say, through policies, through training. But unfortunately, very few firms of any size actually follow through on the training. And that means the word doesn't get out that we have rules about who can talk to the media and if you do what you're supposed to say and if you do how you're supposed to say it.
Even small firms probably have policies. They're just not stated explicitly, and they're probably in the minds of the founder somewhere. But if you ask him or her, they probably have a policy.
Yeah, and the policy is if you say something that causes, this is crazy. If you say something that puts us at risk, I'm going to fire you, right? As with so many other nonlinear aspects of smaller firms, the owner or CEO or president knows what she wants, can't cover everything with everybody, hopes her people know what she means, and realizes that the heart of the small firm policy is basically, if you get caught talking to the press and you say something that hurts my firm, this firm, my firm, I'm probably going to fire you because you may well ruin everything I've put my entire life into for the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And perhaps that sounds terrible, but I can say from experience, perhaps you'd understand if it were your company.
Yeah. Let's say you don't know what the policy is, and we can't cover every possible combination and permutation of policies out there. So for our listeners, if you don't know what the policy, do you have a guess as like what
Yeah.
the number one policy might be?